She said life's a lot to think about sometimes.
We are rolling along with this Peculiar Children series. Today starts off book one of the second trilogy in the series. And I personally delineate between the first three and the second three. You don't necessarily have to, but I do, because the first one was essentially wrapped up. Like, if he never started this, there would have been no issues. But he did, and it also has a really different tone to it. That's why I say we're starting with the second trilogy in the series. And that, if I forgot to mention, Map of Days by Ransom. And apparently it is a signed copy. And I'm just saying, go ahead, Mama and Daddy. Because I'm pretty sure this was a birthday present, since his books tend to come out after Christmas, just before my birthday, so sweet. I gotta say, it's not that I didn't like Map of Days, but as I mentioned, it's got a different tone to it, and I mean, without getting too ahead of myself, like just talking about A Map of Days, I'm just not sure if I really wanted the series to continue. I will say that since it did continue, I wish that essentially the epilogue from Library of Souls had not happened, because Riggs repeats himself, like almost verbatim. He tells us exactly what occurred in that last chapter. And so I didn't need that recap. I there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it, and essentially repeating everything you said when you wrapped up the last book is not the right way to do it. One thing that I've always loved about the Peregrine series is the adventure aspect. And because it's YA, and it's not necessarily like a guy's series, I understood and accepted the romance angle, and so I really enjoyed the romance between Jacob and Emma. However, I felt like in this book, Riggs, I don't know at what point he decided to extend the series. Obviously, and this was something I actually did not catch on to on my first read, because I remember being so surprised when A Map of Days was announced. But obviously, he left the end of Library of Souls open for another book by having Miss Peregrine and her children show up at Jacob's house and all of the troubles that he was having. Like, obviously, it was announcing there was going to be more. But if you look at the original trilogy from the beginning, the way that he built this Jacob-Emma romance, it was something that was supposed to just last forever. He wasn't going to expound upon certain things. So in that respect, I'm glad that he began to open up things like the fact that Emma had been in love with Jacob's grandfather. I do think there were a lot of unanswered questions there where it was just kind of glossed over as to, does she think that Jacob is just an Abe stand-in? And so I liked that respect, but I do feel like what started to happen here with their romance was Riggs saying, I can't continue this, so I gotta figure out a way to cut it off, only to then figure out how to introduce a new romance in his life. And the new romance, I just don't buy it. I don't know why. Maybe, well, first, I don't think that the characters have chemistry. The new girl's name is Noor, and I do not think she and Jacob have chemistry. Maybe it's because I like the Victorianness of, well, I keep referencing this book like this is the one with Jacob and Emma, when really it's the other three. But I liked the Victorianness of his romance with Emma, whereas Noor is a modern girl, and so naturally it's going to be a different kind of relationship. But I felt like Riggs said, okay, it's probably best if I break up the first romance. However, since I'm introducing a new girl, it's common sense to say that Jacob would start falling in love with her, which that is an issue to be left for the next book in the series. Let me just get into this plot. I've talked enough. I need to give you the nitty-gritty. It opens with Jacob returning home from a therapist session in which everybody in his life has decided he needs to go to the nut house because he's making things up and he is a danger to himself and to others. However, they arrive home only to find Miss Peregrine and the peculiar children there. They reveal that because they were in the loop when the loop collapsed, their internal clocks were reset. Ergo, they will not age forward. Now they're just going to be normal kids. So cool, Jacob has his friend group back. This whole surprise does not go over well with his family, and they're essentially drugged for like a day, and then when they wake up, they're convinced that nothing has happened, and his parents go on an extended vacation. Now Jacob and his peculiar friends have the run of the place, but they return to Devil's Acre to learn that a lot of people have stayed there because their loops were ruined, and they're trying to clean up Devil's Acre, which is a question I have. There's a lot that it's not a bad thing. Like, I'm not nitpicking Riggs's writing or the books or anything, but the more I read them, the more my brain starts to question the world building. Not in a bad way, but in a I want more information kind of way. The thing about this whole let's clean up Devil's Acre that I don't quite understand is that in a loop, it resets itself. It basically relives the same day over and over and over. And the Imbrins are the ones that reset it. And so nothing that you've done today is going to last into tomorrow. You keep your memories, but okay, if I picked up that bit of trash is gonna be right back there tomorrow. So I'm trying to figure out how they're cleaning up Devil's Acre when the loop will reset and return everything to the way it was. If today it is raining and then an Imbrin comes in and sets a loop, it's going to rain every single day. Like, you can't stop it. You know, if there's a tidal wave, if there's a tsunami, if there's a whatever, like, that is going to happen every single day because that is how the loop was set. So how can you clean up muck? How can you eradicate smog? Like, how can they clean up Devil's Acre if everything continues to reset? The mindsets of people can change, but you can't actually clean up the location. Anyways, Jacob and his friends come to Devil's Acre. They are given jobs, trying to reinstitute peace and normalcy and whatnot to the peculiar kingdom. They're all like, but we're heroes. Why do we get such crappy, mundane jobs? And I think this is really interesting because we don't see much of Miss Peregrine. We get a lot of her in the first book, but still, I guess he gets to England a fourth of the way through the book. And then he doesn't find her until maybe halfway through the book. So I say we get a lot of her, but we don't. We get maybe half a book. So we don't know what it's like for these children to have an authority figure. We get the sense of what it's like for them to have an authority figure, but for Jacob, he doesn't know Miss Peregrine. He knows who she is via the peculiar children. He knows what she represents, but he doesn't actually know her. And so I think it's interesting to introduce these authority figures into the book finally to tell these peculiar children what to do, and then they're disappointed about it. It was a great dichotomy because we're reading about the exploits and the successes that these children had without an Imbrin, without somebody guiding them and leading them to success. So in a sense, they are adults. Plus, okay, so Emma might be 16 years old, but she's been 16 years old for like 80 years. So she is an adult. She's just in a child's body, which is something that is lightly touched on. And the incensed part of me just wants one of these kids to be like, look, you might be my Imbrin, but I'm 95 years old, and look at all the stuff I went through without you because you got kidnapped. Like, quit treating me like a child. And so in a sense, they do say, we're not children. But Miss Peregrine still likes to rule them with her iron fist. And kind of the same with the other Imbrans. And that is their role, essentially. Rules and standards, you know what I'm saying? They receive these job titles, and they're all kind of like, sweet, I don't like it, but whatever. Like, that's what I'm supposed to do. Then Jacob is tasked with giving the children normal lessons. Now that their internal clocks are reset and they're gonna live out their days like normal kids, they have to learn how to be normal because now they can go into the normal world amongst normal people. So he is taking some of them to get normal clothes and kind of introduce them to normal society when they end up at his grandfather's house. And the kids are like, no, can we go inside? Can you show us where he died? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, and look, we found a hidden room, which I thought was interesting because sometimes I don't quite know how I'm supposed to interpret the peculiar children because, as I said, they're adults trapped in children's bodies. They are asking Jacob, oh, well, where's his war room? And it sounds extremely juvenile. Then he and Emma are kind of at the spot where Abe had died, and then the other ones go inside, only for them to come running out and be like, well, we just figured we'd look for it anyways. Like, as an adult, they weren't kidding about there being a war room. So sometimes I don't quite understand how I'm supposed to interpret them. Like, what is their mindset? In any case, they find the war room, and in the war room, they locate this ledger. Apparently, what Abe had been doing when he left Miss Peregrine's home, went through World War II, and then ended up in America, he became a hollow hunter. He kept a logbook of all the kids that he had tried to rescue. And this is something that I am a little confused about because it was an element I'd forgotten about. We learn in Library of Souls that he had been experimented on voluntarily, but he had been experimented on in which the person took a bit of his peculiar soul and it diminished his ability to see hollows and fight hollows, which is why he left Miss Peregrine's home. Yet, he is this accomplished hologhast hunter in America. It doesn't line up for me. And Riggs, he works really hard at kind of explaining it away. But to me, it's not successful because if he left Miss Peregrine's because he thought he couldn't protect them, then how is he so capable to traverse the entire United States rescuing children from whites and hollows? No matter what the Imbrans and whoever were doing in the aftermath of Library of Souls, like after defeating Call and Bentham and trying to reverse what they had done in the extracting of peculiar souls, like none of that was being done when Abe was in America. So I do not understand how he was such a revered hollow hunter when that was exactly the reason that he left the safety of his own home. Anyways, Jacob, he sees somebody after he receives his job, and he's like, I know that guy. How do I know that guy? And he realizes he had seen a picture of this particular person in Abe's log. So he approaches him, and he's like, look, I know you're not who you actually are, so would you please just give me some information? Because he just wants to learn more about Abe. He wants to know what Abe had been doing in the States. Okay, let me backtrack. He wants to locate Abe's partner. He wants to find other hologhast hunters. So he coerces this character into giving him information, and he contacts this guy whose name is H. H essentially sends him and Emma on a mission. Then they get some of their other friends in, and this is basically what's happening is they have to find Noor. There is an uncontacted peculiar who needs help. So you gotta go find her, and here are some very vague clues have at it, see you later. I enjoyed this aspect of the book. I loved the treasure hunt of it all. Like the fact that Jacob has this obsession with maps, and it was something that he would do with his grandfather, and it turns out that a lot of the maps that they would draw were maps of loops. Jacob's like, oh my gosh, I can figure it out because my grandpa gave me all the tools I needed. And on that note, I did find myself questioning all their suppositions about Abe's intentions, because by all intents and purposes, he wanted Jacob to have nothing to do with the peculiar world. You could argue that just because he doesn't want Jacob to be part of it doesn't mean Jacob won't end up part of it. So if he does find himself in that situation, at least he'll be prepared. But how does he even know he's prepared? Because Abe never told him he was going to do anything. Throughout the book, the peculiar children, or even Jacob, will be like, oh, well, this was Abe. This was Abe doing this for you. This was Abe preparing it for you. This is what Abe wanted for you. I'm like, did he really? I honestly don't know. I feel like we have a lot of supposition about Abe. I personally didn't feel like there was enough to back it up. It was kind of like, let's learn about Abe while also telling you about Abe's intentions at the same time, instead of doing one and then building upon it later. That's when I can again see that maybe Riggs had not intended a second trilogy, because he did not build up Abe in the first 3 books. We got some about him in the first book, and then from there it was kind of like, well, what could my grandfather do with his ability to see Hologast? Or, oh, is Emma in love with me because I'm a replacement for my grandfather? So it wasn't delving into the kind of person Abe was. It was just like, compare myself to Abe and leave it there. They're literally on the brink of finding Nor. Like, they're at her high school when Jacob gets his phone call. No, they not even at the high school. Like, they've tracked her down, which, okay, so the thing is that yes, they track her down to her high school because they turn to the newspapers and they realize, oh, something weird happened at this high school. So they infiltrate the school. And did I say infiltrate? Infiltrate the school. One of the characters, Millard, is invisible. He is able to connect with this girl, and this girl seems to know the person they're looking for, and she's like, well, I don't really trust you, so let's meet up later. And all of his friends are like, dude, you're invisible, why would you blow our cover like this? Like, so dumb. And it turns out she's blind. So then we're like, oh, well, no wonder she didn't question the fact that she was talking to thin air. She's blind. Only to learn that she actually does have enough sight to know there was nobody there, which I'm not disputing any of that. Yes, because she was such good friends with Nor and was seeing Nor's manifestation of her power. This is why she wasn't freaked out about the fact that there was an invisible boy talking to her. I thought it was a little far-fetched. Then this girl leads them to Nor's hiding place, and right when they get there, Jacob gets a phone call, and it's H, and he says, abort the mission. It's great storytelling, but at the same time, it's like, okay, am I just supposed to turn around and tell all my friends to forget it? Like, we are here, okay? If anything, personally, I would be like, all right, I picked you up, I'm gonna take you home. And obviously it doesn't go that smoothly because there are people after her. We don't know who, and I think that's great. Like, Riggs is a really great storyteller. That's one thing, is my brain might be asking questions about the world and the world building, but it's only because he's already set up such a great world that I want to know more about it. I think as Rowling said that, you know, the best writers are the ones that know everything about their world. Whether they're telling us about it or not, like, we get the sense that they know every little thing. And that is essentially what my thought process was. Like, I know Riggs knows so much more and I want to know it too. All we know is that someone's after Nor, but we don't know exactly who. Could it be some escaped whites? Or could it be this other group of American peculiars? Because apparently peculiar America is lawless. And that is one thing I thought was a bit underdeveloped, a bit chaotic for my taste. It was kind of like Riggs he needed something that was polar opposite to what he'd set up, essentially in Europe. Therefore, we're just going to say that Peculiar America has no Imbrans, which is something else that I'm a little hazy on, because I guess I don't quite understand how long Whites and Hologast had been in America, because I get the impression that they were in America for a fraction of the time that they had been in Europe. So how was this Imbran population wiped out so quickly / easily? And then he introduces like a demi-Imbran. So as I said, an Imbran can set a loop, and it just goes around and around and around. And then a demi-Imbran, the only power they have is to reset a loop. But I guess these loops can last for longer periods of time, because these demi-Imbrans, they don't do it every single day. They'll come like once a month, and they travel kind of like, they have districts, they have regions in which they're in charge of, and they reset all those loops. I appreciated Riggs's effort at setting up Peculiar America, but I thought it was a bit jarring in comparison to what I was used to. Anyways, my point is, I like that we have no idea what the danger is. As they're rescuing Noor, one of the children gets not injured necessarily, but it's like she gets shot with some kind of a dart, like I guess that's some kind of poison or something. So they're trying to get her to a hospital, only to get sucked into a loop. And this may be one of my biggest issues. They're on their way there, and Jacob comments that he smells the most delicious smell he's ever smelled. And then, so from there, I'm fine. But then each child starts saying, oh, but this is what I smell, but this is what I smell. And I get that they could be in the early grips of this temptation that's going to draw them into the loop. But did none of them stop and say, wait a minute, you can't be smelling that because I'm smelling this? Like, I would have started an argument, especially if they're as hungry and as tired as I imagine them to be. I would have been like, you can't be right because I'm right. And so I would have thought there would have been a little bit more tension in this moment and a little bit more of second guessing what they're doing. Plus, Lily, the blind girl, is with them, and I was surprised that she was as affected as the Peculiars, because if it's a peculiar trap, I would think that it wouldn't be something that, like, if a normal cannot see and experience certain things within the peculiar community, I would think that the trap set up would be something she's immune to. Anyways, they all enter this restaurant, and I don't know, there's like 10 of them or something, and they're all given their own specific order in this ridiculously speedy amount of time, which, again, I'm like, is nobody saying this is strange? Like, okay, Jacob comments on it, but it almost feels like Riggs's attempt to have someone like me not have a leg to stand on by being like, oh, nobody thought anything strange about this. But it's like, I didn't buy how fast they got reeled into this loop trap. And even Lily gets the meal that she has requested. And the only thing that stops her from continuing on is, obviously, like, she would have been physically incapable. Like, she cannot pass into the loop. But the waitress was like, no, you can't go in there. Nobody put up a fight about that. And then I seriously question Millard, because he's the invisible guy. Riggs picks and chooses the moments where Millard's invisibility becomes an asset. I would think, I mean, I guess this is when maybe I needed a little bit more. So, okay. They get into this restaurant and they're all ordering stuff. So naturally Millard orders something. So the waitress / anybody else she may send her information on to knows there's another person there. But I just kept expecting Millard to fade into the background, to like escape, because you couldn't keep track of him. And that's what I say, like, Riggs does this throughout all of the books, where it's kind of like, well, I really need it to be super easy. I need all of them to get caught. Ergo, nobody's going to question what happened to Millard. Like, Millard's just going to get caught. But then there's other times where it's like, he's listening on conversations, and whoever is in charge is like, well, you know our rules about invisible people. Like, why didn't you tell me you were there? Well, how is it that sometimes people know exactly where he is, and other times people don't? They are under a sort of spell, and they walk through, I equate it to a fun house, where this demented peculiar named Frankie, I don't exactly know what her peculiarity is, but she has some kind of mind control, sorry. There's something where there's a joke about mind control or mime control, and it's obscure. You guys wouldn't know it, but of course, as soon as I fail to actually say mind control, my brain goes back to the other thing. And so they are under a spell of sorts. So in that case, I could understand why Millard did not, like, escape. But still, I think I would have liked it to be pointed out a bit more of, oh, don't forget the invisible one. In any case, Frankie, she's like interrogating each peculiar child, because I guess she turns them into dolls of some sort. I don't really know. The only one that she finds mildly interesting is Enoch. So then she's going to sell all the others, only for them to almost talk their way out of it until Jacob. And again, this is one of those things where I feel like it was Riggs having a problem but not really wanting to address it, where Jacob just blurts out the fact that Noor is uncontacted, and then in Peculiar America, this band of peculiar children cannot rescue an uncontacted peculiar because it's considered kidnapping, because she is essentially in the jurisdiction of an American clan. And so for them to try to take her out of New York means that it's like a capital offense. They're handed over to this clan. Somehow, this is a spoiler, somehow when they almost talk their way out of being sold, they're able to break Frankie's mental hold, which enables Enoch to escape. He gets back to the loop, and then this is when he is able to get some immigrants to come and rescue the children. In the meantime, they're held in the prison cells of this New York gang, and they're interrogating Jacob. I guess they just simply don't believe their story, that they aren't trying to usurp command. And then he, again, I'm just like, Jacob, after everything you've been through, you'd think you know better about keeping his mouth shut? Like, knowing the appropriate things to say and not say? He reveals that his grandfather, this is what his grandfather used to do, and that's why he was doing this. He not only reveals the grandfather's nickname, but then he's like, yeah, this is his real name. I mean, hello, Spy 101. You never reveal your real name, whether you're dead or alive. You don't tell people your real name. Then they start interrogating him because apparently his grandfather, they consider his grandfather to be evil. Like, I forget exactly, but a kidnapper and a murderer, because he would rescue peculiar children only for them to never be seen again. And then I guess at least one of them did turn up dead. And so now they're beating Jacob up, and they're like, oh, well, you're going to pay for your grandfather's sins. And I would have enjoyed a little bit more of that. Like, I don't remember. It's possible we get more in one of the other two books, but I don't believe so. So I would have liked for some things to have been explained a little bit more as to the truth behind what these people have experienced. In any case, Jacob and his friends, minus Noor, are rescued because they're not allowed to take Noor with them because, as I said, capital offense. Jacob gets really angry about this, and he's like, well, I'm gonna go rescue her. And he calls H, and he realizes that H has already done it. So he goes to find H, only to realize that H is dying. He has been shot. However, H has had this hologas, like basically as a pet, and his hologas name is Horatio. He gives Jacob just enough information to go on for the next leg of his journey as to like why Noor is so important and what they need to be doing. He allows Horatio to eat his eyes out, which is essentially, I guess, like eating his soul, and you know, the more souls that, or peculiar souls that hologas eat, the closer they become to becoming white. This is something that, again, I'm gonna have to wait till I finish the other books to see what the answer is, but from what I recall, we never see Horatio again, which is unsettling for me. But yeah, he gives them a little bit more information, then he jumps out a window as a white, and so I'm like, that's it? Okay, all right. That's basically where the book ends. It's not a bad book. I enjoyed the treasure hunt aspect. I thought that was really enjoyable. We got to see a lot of loops, and that is probably why I liked this treasure hunt, because that's always been my favorite part of this series, is seeing the peculiarities, seeing what Riggs comes up with in order to expand his peculiar world. I had a hard time with the whole romance thing, because there's a point where the children are on their way out of one loop trying to continue on their mission, and we learn that Emma had called Abe, you know, from this earlier point in time, like when they were in the loop. This causes an argument between her and Jacob, and so it's like, I like it, but I don't like it, because I like that we're addressing the whole why does she like me thing. Like, we really do need to know more about what's going on in this romance. Jacob naturally gets upset because he's like, so why are you calling my grandfather and telling him you love him when you're telling me you love me? And I just don't buy it. But then my issue comes in because, and again, it just shows me that Riggs, he's trying to get out of something that he built up, and he's not doing a good job, because honestly, he's a dude. I'm putting it down to the fact that he's a dude. This is not his forte. His forte is writing about peculiarities, not romance. And so he's trying, but it's falling flat. So my issue here is, in the first 3 books, Jacob and Emma are falling in love. So we get to Library of Souls. They've rescued the Embrons. This Peregrine catches them just sleeping next to each other, with each other. She gets angry, and there's this whole discussion about, well, what's your intention, and guard her heart. And she has a Victorian mindset about things, and so she's not the one you need to worry about. Like, her feelings are genuine. You know, it's more about like you and your modern sensibilities, and how are you going to view this relationship. And so it's all about, oh, well, Jacob is the one who is going to break Emma's heart. And it's a huge production. Jacob, at the same time, is feeding us these lines of reassurance that no, he loves Emma. Only for the fight then to be about Emma going behind Jacob's back about her true feelings. I love it because there's that self-righteous indignation stuff going on there, only for then it to turn back around to Jacob. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but for him to then start falling in love with Noor, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where he's the one they were worried about, that his emotions would be so fickle, and then we're casting blame on Emma, only for him to do exactly what they were accusing him of potentially doing. It's like Riggs can't make up his mind as to where he wants to go. I have a really hard time with it, because he and Emma had known each other for 2 or 3 weeks before Peregrine gets captured. And then when they actually rescue her, it's like 4 days later. So all of this is occurring under a month, in which they're in love. And we all know my views, so disregard my tone and my viewpoint as much as you want. I will not be offended. Granted, it feels longer than a month, but at the same time, he was kind of in love with her from the very beginning, which I'm not going to get into. So there's these super strong feelings, yet he's still questioning her intent. And then, yeah, we get to this book and we have like 2 days in between from when they break up in this book, which I think takes place over 2 or 3 days, to the next book, which is taking place over the course of a week. And he has had like 1 or 2 days of being broken up with Emma before he starts to fall in love with Noor. I'm just saying. It's emotional romantic whiplash. I can't take it. I don't connect with Noor. I would have been fine with Noor if she had just been a character, somebody that they had to rescue. And maybe by getting to know her as just a neutral entity, I could have started to root for her and be like, oh, she'd be a really great replacement for Emma. But instead, it's like, well, because Noor is here, we can't have 2 love interests, so we're going to have to get rid of one so that Jacob can pursue the other, because it would just be ludicrous for him to want to stay with one girl the entire time. It just bugs me. However, on another note, this book reminded me, in the initial trilogy, Bronwyn, the strong girl, has a brother. Jacob is tricked into going to this brother's room because the brother had been killed by a white, and then because the loop resets itself every day, he essentially doesn't decay because his biological clock, dead or alive, is not advancing. We get this really brief glimpse at the brother. I love how things are kind of cyclical when you think about it. It's like a paradox where Jacob gets to this island and learns about the old man, the bog boy, this body that had been mummified in the bog and then, put in a museum on display. We learn that after Miss Peregrine's home is destroyed by the bomb and they rescue Bronwyn's brother, that he's the bog boy. So there's the bog boy there before Jacob ever visits the island. But if Jacob had never visited the island, the whites never would have found Miss Peregrine's home. Ergo, the home never would have been destroyed, and there's been no need to put Bronwyn's brother in the bog. So it's kind of cool how it's a paradox. But I feel like there's so much more behind the brother and the brother's story. But all we get is Abe had left. The brother was kind of like, well, I want to do the same thing. I'm tired of being in this loop. Yet he was almost immediately attacked by a Hologhast. And so I'm like, I want to know more about it. I want to know, how did he get ambushed so quickly? How did they find him? Like, how did all of this come to pass? And then we get nothing from Bronwyn about her brother, like, except for a passing mention, which reminded me about that whole situation. If Abe left the loop in 1940s, that would have been like 70 years for Bronwyn to sort of live without her brother and be accustomed to not having an interaction with him. Although in the first book, she seems to be very sensitive about him and missing him and enjoying when Enoch, the dead riser, is able to raise him from the dead and let her talk to him. So it's obvious she's not completely over him. Like, she will always miss him. And I know he's not a major player in the story, so I understand why Riggs doesn't continue to bring up his name. But I felt like his story had a good bit of emphasis only to be left hanging. And I just read that Riggs has a new book coming out, and it's not part of the canon. It's almost like with Harry Potter, where she had all those books and then she wrote a couple books about like the odds and ends of the magical world of Harry Potter. It's kind of like that, where it's a book written from Miss Peregrine's perspective about peculiardom. So maybe we'll get something in that book, but as of now, I'm still, again, I just want more about this world. I want to know how it works. There are a lot of things that when I sit down and think about it don't make sense. However, if they make sense to you, please, by all means, enlighten me. I'm sure there's far more about this book that I'm missing, but I'm gonna leave it here. If you have questions, leave them down below. If you have comments, leave them down below. If you have anything that can help enrich this review, leave it down below. Don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, all that good stuff. Let me know what books you want me to do next. I'll see you then. Bye.